ඊළඟට ගරු ආචාර්ය ගරු හරුණි අමරසූරිය මැතිණිය ඔබතුමියට මිනිත්තු 9ක කාලයක් තියෙනවා.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Speaker. Our country, unfortunately, for the last 40 odd years, have spent most of our time being governed under emergency regulations. I think, in particular, our generation, my generation, has lived under emergency regulations for so long that for many of us it had become normalized. Certainly for the people of the North and East, emergency regulations were very much a part of their existence. But the emergency regulations that we are debating today, that were imposed on the 18th of July, are unique for two specific reasons. One is that it includes measures that are draconian and most repressive in ways that it has never been before. For instance, it allows for a person to be arrested even by the military to be kept up to 72 hours. I do not think this has happened before. It has vested within the president powers which are largely unchecked. For 72 hours, this person need not be presented before a court, need not be presented to the police. Powers that have been delegated to the police and to the military have expanded exponentially. For example, simple offences now are described as high crimes and can include imprisonment up to 20 years or even life imprisonment. So that what is necessary is not to just look at the imposition of emergency regulations, but what has been gazetted under this particular emergency regulations. The measures that have been taken are unprecedented. And it's unprecedented for a second reason, that these measures were imposed by a president who was an acting president at the time, who was unelected. Right? To this day, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, as we know, is someone who lost his own constituency. It is he who came into power, who was elected to his position by this parliament, who is imposing these draconian measures. So these emergency regulations, when we are discussing them today, we have to take into account the specific nature of the emergency measures that are being considered, that we are debating, and also the context within which this particular regulation is being imposed today. In general, when emergency regulations are declared, there's an understanding that it should be there should be specific circumstances, that there is some deep threat to national security or to public security. It is under those circumstances that emergency regulations are usually imposed. But what are the conditions under which these emergency regulations have been imposed? We know that the protests that people have been engaging in for the past several months have risen primarily due to deep economic measures, deep economic distress that people are undergoing. Most of the protests that started with the economic conditions that people have had to undergo, that people have been distressed by. How those kinds of protests can be described as a threat to national security and threat to public security is something that needs to be considered. People got to the streets because of hunger, because of loss of livelihood, because of the trouble that the conditions that their children are not being able to go to school, shortage of medicine, shortage of fuel, basic things that people need to get on with their lives. These are still not resolved. These problems are still there. Do you expect the people of this country to sit back and accept these conditions and to accept this as normal? It is not normal. They are not able to get on with their lives. Children have been deprived of school for over 2.5 years. It is under these conditions that people got onto the streets. And to interpret that and to describe that as fascist, as terrorist, as actions of a terrorist group, to equate it in that way, to describe it in those terms, shows the lack of sensitivity to the concerns of the people that people making such decisions are subject to. If you look at how these emergency regulations have also been implemented. On the 21st of July, unarmed protesters at 1 a.m. early in the morning, was that necessary? Was it necessary for them to be evicted from their protest sites at that time in the morning, when they had already agreed to vacate that site the next day? Within a few hours, that was the agreement that they had announced, that they were leaving those sites. Yet, the government saw fit to attack those civilian protesters early in the morning. They saw it fit to deny them access to legal support and to medical support. Ambulances were barred from entering these sites. Lawyers were banned from entering those sites. Lawyers and media people who were there were also brutally attacked. How is this proportionate to to the seeming threat that the public or the nation was facing at that time? Since then, arrests have been made of people who've been critical of the state, of state institutions on social media. How is that proportionate action? People have been pulled off planes. These sites are now being broadcast throughout the world in a way that is highly damaging to our international image, highly damaging to the commitments that this government has made towards democracy, towards upholding the rights of people. So this is the reality in which these regulations are being experienced by people. We know that emergency regulations come within the law of this country. It's in our constitution. But we also know that emergency regulations have been used over and over again in this country to stifle dissent, to stifle criticism of government, and it has always meant upholding the status quo and upholding the establishment at the cost of civilian lives, at the cost of civilian freedoms. So what we are seeing today, even in the debate today, once again what we are seeing is we are neglecting the causes of people's protests. We are neglecting the reasons that have driven people to the streets, and once again we are talking about the concerns of the 225 here. Yes, what happened to MPs who one who lost his life, the many who lost their homes, that's not something that can be condoned. That is not something that is acceptable. But over 20 civilians have also died in queues. So many citizens of our country have lost their homes, so many different occasions. Have we been as concerned, as sensitive to those situations as we have been to when our own lives and our own homes have been under attack? Is it not understandable that people have such a rage against the 225, rage against this parliament? Unless we take those feelings into account, unless we take those experiences into account, we will continue to be despised. This institution will continue to be despised and seen as irrelevant to the lives of the people, and that is highly dangerous to democracy in this country. So think about what it is that we are trying to combat, whether this is proportionate to the situation that is outside, whether what is being implemented under emergency regulations is proportionate to the threat that is perceived. To whom is this threat really being directed? Who is under threat? And if you listen to the discussions today, the people who are feeling most under threat are the 225 of us. So does that warrant then this kind of intervention, this kind of draconian intervention in order to safeguard the lives and property of 225 versus the millions outside, and the concerns and the issues that the millions outside are facing? So once again, let's not hide behind what is constitutional. We also have to do what is right by the people. We also have to do what is seen to be right by the people. If in any way we are to reassert the legitimacy of this parliament again, we have to respond to what is happening outside. We have to respond to the actual problems that people are facing outside, rather than simply make this simply something about, once again, the 225 inside here. Thank you.